Roll call.
Councilmember Maria Cecilia Cruz,
Present.
Councilmember Tadeo Sael de la Hoya,
Present.
Councilmember Matias Rosales,
Present.
Councilmember Gloria Torres,
Present.
Councilmember Javier Vargas,
Present.
Vice Mayor Luis Cabrera,
Present.
Mayor Nieves Raidel.
Present.
Mayor, you have a quorum. Item number 2, discussion and possible action item. Item number 2A, presentation by Kimley Horn, Inc. on the San Luis Port of Entry Impact Study. Jenny Torres, Assistant City Manager, and Chris Joans, Project Manager.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. Back in 2021, the city of San Luis decided to focus in developing a San Luis One Port of Entry impact study because of the impacts that modernization of the port would have on our downtown, specifically our traffic. During that time, the Arizona Department of Transportation, ADOT, and the Yuma Metropolitan Planning Organization, YMPO, decided to partnership with the city in order to conduct this study. The study had 3 different elements. It included the circulation study, it included a parking study in the downtown, and it included an origin and destination study. We did contract with Kimley Horn and Associates, and tonight Mr. Chris Jones will be providing the results of that study. This study has already been presented to the YMPO, and a copy of the study has been provided to ADOT. So Chris?
All right, thank you, Jenny. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Are you all able to see that in the council chambers?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you all very much for your time tonight and giving us the opportunity to present the results of this pretty exciting study. As you know, the Port of Entry modernization is probably the biggest project that the city will see in a generation, and making sure that the city's ready and has planned ahead to accommodate the growth in traffic is incredibly important. So as part of the study, we broke it up into 6 elements that you can see here on the screen, and we'll briefly step through each of those with an emphasis on the circulation and parking analysis, which is really where we get into the meat of future recommendations. To lead off, traffic data collection back in early 2022, shortly after we got under contract with the city, we collected a pretty large series of traffic data during peak harvest season in January and February. And you can see here listed on the screen a sample of that data that we collected. So we got 9 segment classification counts, which tell us over a 24-hour period. Actually, we did it for 4 days straight. So over a Friday through a Monday, when the peak times are on the city streets that have blue dots on them in the map on the right-hand side. We did 29 intersection turning movement counts at peak hours so that we were able to get both vehicles and pedestrians at each of the study area intersections. We collected travel time data through a program that uses anonymized cell phone data to track how long it takes people to move from the port of entry to kind of the exterior points of the downtown study area, and from those exterior points to the southbound port of entry. And we also conducted a field visit to get an understanding of how far traffic is lining up at intersections where there's a lot of vehicle pedestrian interactions, get a sense of driver behaviors, and observe bus and taxi operations within the downtown study area. As Jenny mentioned, we also did a regional origin destination study looking at where people, once they cross from Mexico into the United States at San Luis One Port of Entry, where they go within San Luis, where else in the Yuma region, and then try to capture how many people are traveling from the port of entry all the way through the Yuma region out to other areas. And so you can see a sample here. This is from a weekday. We also did a weekend analysis. And how we collected this was we actually put Bluetooth and Wi-Fi data collection devices at the port of entry, and then at all of these spots on the map where you see the arrows with percentages on them, so that we would capture people coming across, and then once they would move into another part of the region, we would be able to capture them again and kind of track through the region where people are traveling. You can see the results here. About half of people that cross through the San Luis port of entry remain in San Luis after they cross, at least for a little bit of time. They're not traveling directly through. And then another 28% of people are leaving San Luis but staying somewhere else in the Yuma region. That kind of big yellow circle shows the area where we were capturing people staying. So all the way from just north or east of San Luis up to the Yuma Proving Grounds, east of the foothills area. And finally, we found that about 19% of people that are traveling through the port of entry are leaving to other parts of Arizona or California. And you can see the percentages at each of the arrow locations kind of break down what percentage of that population or the traveling public coming through the port of entry, where they're all traveling. And this piece especially was of interest to the YMPO, as they're the regional planning organization, to understand what impact the port of entry has on the larger Yuma region. We also did a vehicular and pedestrian intercept survey. So this was to get more a qualitative sense of what types of people and how the port of entry is being used by the traveling public. What we did was we actually had survey takers stand in both the vehicular and the pedestrian line, waiting to cross through the northbound port of entry from Mexico into the United States. And we were able to, over the course of 4 days, get 929 people to actually stand with us and take this survey. We were even surprised at how successful we were at getting people to talk. And so we were able to get a great set of data out of this on people's trip purposes. So why are they crossing through the port of entry? How long they're planning on staying in the United States, or if they're traveling back into the United States. How frequently they travel through the port of entry, kind of what they plan to spend, how much they plan to spend, and kind of breaking down into how they plan on spending money once they cross from Mexico to the United States. And finally, what modes of travel are they using once they get into San Luis? Are they driving through, or are they crossing as a pedestrian and then getting a taxi, getting on the YCAT bus, getting just walking once they get into San Luis? And so you can see kind of a snapshot of some of the trends that we found from that public survey along the right side of the screen here. We have a lot more detailed analysis of this in the draft report that was attached to the agenda for this meeting, if you're interested in understanding a bit more what we found with the survey. But you can see our destination pretty well matches what we found with the regional origin destination study, and that about half of people are staying in San Luis. Another 30 to 40% are leaving San Luis but staying somewhere else in Yuma, and about a little over 10% are traveling outside of Yuma. Most people, especially because this was peak harvest season when we did this survey, are traveling for work or business. So a lot of workers crossing to go work in the agricultural fields around the region. About 20% were people who live in the United States and were going home, and another 20% were crossing to go shopping in San Luis or somewhere else in the Yuma region. And then you can see at the bottom kind of a breakdown of some of the major spending categories that we asked people about. We also did a parking analysis at the beginning of the study, where we actually had a drone pilot come out to San Luis and fly over the downtown study area and capture aerial images for us at 5 different times throughout a typical Monday. And from that, we're able to identify about 4,800 total parking spaces in downtown. And then you can see in the graph on the bottom left, kind of how over the course of the day between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., how full those parking spaces are. The maximum occupancy was at 10 a.m. that we observed, with just around 40% of the total parking spaces occupied. But you can see in the right-hand side, the map we have there, that shows the peak occupancy by the different parking lots and on-street parking spots that we observed. It's not evenly distributed. There are definitely some parking lots and a lot of on-street parking that is completely full during that peak time, and a lot of very underutilized parking facilities. And so this kind of fed into our ultimate parking analysis and recommendations, which we'll get into here in a little bit. The kind of biggest piece of the study was the circulation analysis. Obviously, finding out what the city needs to do to accommodate an increase of traffic as a result of the expansion of the port of entry was kind of the key component to the study. And so we developed a simulation model of the entire downtown study area. We took in all of that traffic data that we collected at the beginning of the process and used that to build and calibrate this model that, as you can see on the right-hand side, and we'll have a little video clip on the next slide, actually simulates each vehicle and pedestrian going through the downtown network so that we could really get a good idea of where there's bottlenecks and issues that we need to resolve as a result of the port expansion. You can see here, I hope it's coming through at an okay speed, a little video clip of the simulation model. And you can see this is the William Brooks and U Street intersection from our existing conditions model. And you can see that the pedestrians crossing hold up the vehicles at the intersection. And so this is a really good way for us to identify where those issues are. And what we're able to do is actually quantify what the delay to vehicles is at each intersection from this model, and really be able to tell from a numeric standpoint where the issues in the network are. So we started off by building a model that replicates what we see out there today. So again, we took in all that data from early 2022 and modeled a morning and an afternoon peak hour. We calibrated it to Federal Highway Administration standards and identified where there's congestion in the network. You'll see in the map on the right-hand side, we have each of the intersections in the network and their rating of a level of service A through F would be the ultimate, where A is basically free flow and F is completely stop and go traffic and a lot of delay. So you'll see in the existing condition, really the only intersection that comes even close to having a lot of congestion is the William Brooks and U Street intersection. But you can see, even though the overall intersection level of service might be okay, those red arrows indicate spots where one approach, so people coming into for example, Main Street and U Street from the east are experiencing a lot of delay. It's just that overall, when you put together all the different movements at the intersection, it's not all that bad, but these areas of concern are something that we're looking at as we move through the modeling process here. So after the existing model, we aim to build a model that represents essentially the first day after opening of the expanded port of entry occurs. But to get there, there's quite a few network changes that happened in the downtown area as a result of the port expansion. And so you can see kind of along the bottom of the map on the right-hand side, red indicates access that's going away. Blue indicates kind of new primary access. So both the northbound port of entry, the primary access will now line up with William Brooks Avenue with a secondary exit point at 2nd Avenue. On the southbound, Mexico is also planning on expanding their port of entry, and that will line up directly with Archibald Street rather than having people going southbound turn left on U Street and then right into the port of entry. And then all of the pedestrian traffic will be focused in the middle of the access on Main Street, which helps kind of disentangle the vehicular and pedestrian traffic and all those conflicts we see out there today. Also, because the city of San Luis was successful in achieving or receiving funding from the state for the Cesar Chavez Boulevard widening project, we did include those network changes in the opening year network as well, as that would be opening at about the same time as the port of entry. And so all the widening and access changes that were part of that widening project were included in our network. And so the opening year model, again, simulates once the port of entry is open to account for the extra people that would be coming through the expanded port of entry at peak times as a result of reduced delay in crossing. We did up all the volumes to and from the port of entry by 20% and kept all other volumes in the network the same. And you can see that we do start to experience quite a bit more traffic congestion along U Street at William Brooks, 2nd Avenue, Cesar Chavez Street, and 4th Avenue, as well as some degradation up at Cesar Chavez Boulevard and Main Street at the north end of the study area. We do start to experience some congestion there in the opening year. Then to get a picture of the long-term traffic impacts here, we did a 20-year past the opening year model, where we grew all the traffic in the model by an annual growth rate of 2% per year, which is relatively aggressive. And you can see that congestion along U Street gets worse. All the intersections at William Brooks, 2nd Avenue, and Cesar Chavez Street are at a level of service E. 4th Avenue is at a level of service F. And the intersections up along Cesar Chavez Boulevard at Main Street and to the west are also becoming quite congested in the 20-year network. And so looking at the model, the nice thing that we can get from this simulation model versus more of a static traffic model is that we can identify the root causes of congestion, where if we, for example, all the intersections east of the port of entry exit on U Street were congested, but if we solve the issue at U Street and William Brooks Avenue, that actually clears up the congestion at those other intersections. It's all really stemming from that congestion at that one intersection. And so we identified these 5 locations as kind of the root causes of congestion in the network and developed a couple alternatives for each of them to test what the best option is for improvement. And so we'll walk through those here pretty quickly. So first is William Brooks and U Street. We looked at first a traffic signal at that location, which will again be the primary exit for the northbound port of entry, as well as a pedestrian overpass and underpass at that location, because there are a lot of pedestrians that does ultimately slow down traffic moving through the intersection. And so if we were able to put pedestrians either above or below the roadway, that would help operations. And you can see we've listed some pros and cons here. And then as we get to the end of the circulation study presentation here, we'll talk through kind of what our ultimate recommendations ended up being. At Main Street and B Street, we had 3 alternatives here. The primary issue here was westbound traffic on B Street not being able to get across Main Street, as well as safely accommodating pedestrians. So we looked at signalizing the intersection, adding a hawk signal similar to the one next to the roundabout down by the southbound port of entry now, having a hawk signal across the south leg of the intersection to accommodate pedestrians, and finally converting the intersection to a roundabout similar to the one down at Main Street and U Street. And you can see some pros and cons on each of those as well. Some of them don't really improve traffic very much. Some of them have a right-of-way impact. And so those are all factors we looked at in deciding our ultimate recommendation. At Cesar Chavez Boulevard and Main Street, this is really the primary pinch point in the 20-year scenario, where the amount of traffic growth on both of these roadways is expected to be quite large. And so even with the San Luis or the Cesar Chavez Boulevard widening project, more capacity may be needed at this intersection as volumes continue to grow. And so we looked at a few alternatives. One was adding an additional westbound left turn lane beyond the widening project that's already planned. Another one was converting the second through lane westbound to a second left turn lane. This would help us avoid widening the roadway further and having more right-of-way impacts. And finally, if we tried to adequately accommodate the traffic regardless of the right-of-way impacts, we would add a second left turn lane westbound, as well as right turn lanes northbound and southbound, dedicated right turn lanes. And all three of those would have impacts on surrounding right-of-way, which is very tight around this intersection. At Cesar Chavez and 4th Avenue, there was a minor problem on the southbound approach, which can be solved by creating a separate right turn lane rather than having a shared through right turn lane. And so that's a pretty easy and inexpensive fix at that location. And finally, Cesar Chavez Boulevard and Mesa Street. With the widening project, there is going to be a median across this intersection on Cesar Chavez Boulevard, meaning that people won't be able to make lefts from Cesar Chavez onto Mesa Street to access the post office, or from Mesa Street to Cesar Chavez Boulevard West if you're leaving the post office. And so we looked at a few alternatives to accommodate that traffic. The first one is, okay, if we can't make that left, what's the next best way through the existing network that people would be able to get to Cesar Chavez Boulevard westbound? And you can see there it involves a lot of turns, and some of those intersections and segments are quite congested, especially in the 20-year time frame. So a lot of cons associated with that one. Concept 2 would be accommodating U-turns at Cesar Chavez and Main Street. But because there is already so much traffic at that location, it's really congested. The cars lining up eastbound would actually go beyond Mesa Street, and so that might cause a little bit of gridlock at this location. And finally, the connector road, which was included in the conceptual design for the Cesar Chavez Boulevard widening back in 2014, which would go from Mesa Street near the post office and create a one-way road down to the new roundabout at San Luis Plaza Drive and Cesar Chavez Boulevard. And while this does solve the issue of allowing people to circulate out of the post office, it is quite expensive. And so finally, we get to, out of each of those alternatives, what did we ultimately end up recommending? So at William Brooks and U Street, we ultimately chose to signalize that intersection rather than have a pedestrian overpass or underpass. And then in talking with the team that's doing the traffic analysis for the port of entry expansion itself, that's ultimately the conclusion they came to as well. And so we feel good about that one, that two teams independently came to the same conclusion. At Main Street and B Street, we're also recommending signalizing that intersection to both accommodate traffic on B Street and safely accommodate pedestrians so that they're not walking across an uncontrolled intersection like they are today. At Cesar Chavez and Main Street, really in the long-term scenario, despite there being some pretty major right-of-way impacts, we do feel that we need dual westbound lefts as well as northbound and southbound right turn lanes. And so that is going to be quite a challenging project with the right-of-way constraints there, but especially by that 20-year horizon, it does appear that it's going to be quite necessary. At Cesar Chavez and 4th, again, adding that right turn lane to the southbound approach. And then at Cesar Chavez Boulevard and Mesa Street, again, even though it's the most expensive option, that connector roadway that goes from the post office down to San Luis Plaza Drive is really, from a traffic standpoint, the only way to adequately accommodate people that are leaving the post office without really negatively impacting the Cesar Chavez Boulevard and Main Street intersection. And moving from our circulation recommendations to our parking recommendations, parking, we broke it up into short-term and long-term recommendations. And really, we see it more as start with your short-term and hope that that fixes the problem. And then we have that long-term as kind of a backup to that. that you start moving through and keep trying things until we ultimately get to, you'll see in our long-term recommendations, some more expensive propositions for the city. But first off, we want to start by implementing parking time limits throughout a good portion of the study area, the area in purple and red on the right there. Right now, there's a lot of issues with people who cross the border and are going to work in the agricultural fields, park all day on street or in alleyways, which is causing a lot of issues in the downtown area. And so implementing a 6-hour time limit for parking and with the enforcement that goes along with that would help alleviate that long-term parking problem. But we list out a few steps here in getting to that solution. So reviewing and revising the city code to make sure that implementing time limits and the enforcement of those time limits is permitted. Doing stakeholder engagement with downtown residents and business owners on this new proposed time limit and making sure that that's accepted by the people in the downtown area. The existing parking meters in downtown are quite old, and it's becoming increasingly challenging for the city to maintain those parking meters. And they're not really producing a lot of revenue for the city. And so we advocate removing and possibly replacing them with pay stations or some other type of technology that has a lower infrastructure cost. We've talked with the Public Works and Police Department on some options for that. Constructing the north lot improvements, so under the power lines at the north end of the study area between D Street and Cesar Chavez Boulevard. The city did some conceptual design for that a couple years ago, I believe. And we've kind of rolled that into this study as something we'd recommend doing as the funds become available to start formalizing the parking up in that area and accommodating bus pickup and drop off operations to kind of decongest a lot of the parking issues and pickup and drop off issues in the downtown area for the agricultural shuttles. Then we would begin to actually implement those no parking and time limit restrictions, followed up with some enforcement. We've outlined kind of a plan for how enforcement could look in the downtown area. And we've talked with the police department and Public Works on kind of who has the ability to enforce and what sort of time commitment that would take. And so that's all discussed in the report. And finally, doing ongoing monitoring to see if these recommendations are having the intended impact. If after doing those observations and conditions aren't really improving to the point that the city would like to see, then we have these longer term solutions to start implementing afterwards. And that really revolves around creating a residential parking permit program in the downtown area. Again, the first step for that would be reviewing and revising the city code as needed to make sure that that is permitted within the code. Again, doing stakeholder engagement to inform and talk with people in the downtown area to make sure that they understand what the impacts are going to be. And then you could go ahead and implement the residential parking program, residential parking permit program, a lot of P's in there, apologies. And along with that, putting out the requisite signage and enforcement. And again, we've talked with the police department on kind of how that could look and what the equipment needs would be to enforce a residential parking permit, where people actually have their cars registered with the city residents do to see who is a resident versus who is a visitor, and enforcing parking and the time limits through that. And again, ongoing monitoring to see if that has the intended effect, and if all else fails, constructing another formal parking lot on the south side of the downtown area to increase the parking capacity again. But as this is very expensive, we have that as kind of our last resort recommendation in the plan. And you can see we did sketch out a very high level concept where if the city were able to use some of the underutilized industrial space in the industrial park just east of the San Luis One port of entry. You could fit about 1,000 parking spaces, as well as some amenities and a bus pickup drop-off area. And this would be even more convenient than that north lot for people walking across the port of entry. And so if all else fails, this is another option for the city to address the parking needs downtown. So I know that was a lot of information very quickly, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have and circle back to any of the slides where you'd like any additional information.
Any questions, comments from council?
I do have a comment.
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember De La Hoya. Yes?
Yes, I just want to thank you, Kimberly Horn, for your work, and I know you've done work for us before. There's been like the modernization GSA project that was done in 2018 with a few recommendations that come forward in these studies, and that we keep paying consultants over and over again, and sometimes we don't take the minimal recommendations, at least to plan ahead of time. So I'd like to just to make a comment on this particular one, or in this particular study, especially because it's about traffic, but just in general, that if we're going to be paying consultants that much, that we should be evenly, spending money or investing, or at least planning for the future with, the answers that we have. We just addressed the taxi problem with an answer that was already in the 2018 study. So I would hate for this study to be here paid for, regardless of how much it was paid for, that taxpayers did, but nothing being done or planned for the future. And that's about it. Thank you.
I do have a comment. I'm very pleased to hear that you have 929 responders. It goes to prove my point. We are very friendly, talkative people. This is a place to be in San Luis. We love to talk, communicate, and I want to congratulate you. This is the first time that I see this study, and as I was making notes based on how little I know about construction, I was making my notes, and then everything that you're recommending, this should be number one, this should be number three. So I'm amazed by the job that you have done. Personally, this is Mayor Rydell. I congratulate you. And hopefully we can take care of this in a very near future. We need to do it. There's no time to lose anymore. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Anybody else?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to make a comment. Thank you so much, Chris. Very, very beautiful presentation. I just wanted to make a comment that on the 5 root causes on one of them is William and U Street. I preferred concept number 2, that overpass. To me, I guess I've always wanted that overpass. But it seems to me like if, there would be no cars and pedestrians, you have to stop and let the pedestrians cross. But if we have an overpass, the pedestrians would just cross over so easily, and there would be no cars stopping. But that's just my 2 cents.
It's very expensive, and there's a lot of elderly people that we have to put elevators so they can go over. That's one of the things I like overpasses too, especially when you go to Mexicali. There's a whole bunch of them. But the overpass is a very expensive model to do.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is what's nice with the new port of entry design is that the pedestrian kind of walkways, both northbound and southbound, are going to be more lined up with Main Street rather than William Brooks. And so I think that'll help alleviate a lot of those issues where pedestrians crossing that stop controlled intersection are holding up a lot of cars. Most people will now be going over towards the Main Street corridor. And so I think that will help alleviate a lot of that issue on its own. But yeah, we really also kind of wanted the overpass or underpass option to work, but there is a cost. There's issues with securing the right of way to be able to do that, and some people at the port also weren't happy about potentially putting people up over ground level where they'd be kind of seeing into the operations of the port. So unfortunately, there were a few constraints with that one that ultimately pushed us over towards recommending a traffic signal instead.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? If not, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Item number 2B, discussion and possible directions to staff on any and all matters regarding parking in alleys and the San Luis City Code Section 10.15.235. Miguel Alvarez, Interim Police Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Do we have a PowerPoint, Sonia?
I did not get one.
No.
There is one from the fire and.
Yeah, for the fire. I guess that's the one I was gonna use. For me, basically, the presentation is on the ordinance that was sent by our city attorney, Ms. Kay. You reference to the reason why we needed to change out the existing ordinance for alleyway parking. My recommendation were mostly for public safety interest, being that we did get comments from local business owners that it was too crowded, it made them feel unsafe, and that they also witnessed emergency personnel having trouble driving past those alleyways. So while addressing those issues, I noticed that in fact there was very limited access even to some of the patrol vehicles that we drive at the department, and not as large as the fire department or public works trash picking vehicles. So with that, we came and introduced this to the city manager at the time and the city attorney to try to find a solution to that. And with it is the proposed alleyway changes to the city ordinance, as well with some things that are affecting the fire department and public works, as I just mentioned.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. So yeah, like Chief Alvarez had mentioned a couple of months ago, more than a couple months ago, this was brought to our attention to talk about the alley parking. A couple of my captains also responded to a call in the alleyway, and they did mention to me that in the morning, there's a lot of parking that, especially on the alleys south of B towards Urtusuastigi, there's no way they could get in. So they had to get off and walk and tend to the patient. So that kind of piqued my interest. Is this for the PowerPoint? Can you open that PowerPoint, Sonia? I decided to make, it's 4 slides that I created. I tasked a couple of these captains to go out to the alleyways, take a couple of pictures, and see if they could safely maneuver our ladder truck in the alleyways. My concern is response times. The fire department, our biggest concerns are obviously the residents and the safety of our residents. We are governed, our CON, which is the right that DHS, Arizona DHS gives us, to be able to have a CON, to be able to operate ambulances within the city of San Luis. We get an audit every 1 to 3 years. We've had 2 audits, and they look at our response times, And if they deem that we are meeting those response times, they extend that audit for every 3 years. So every single time they came into the city, we always get the 3-year audit, meaning that we are meeting those response times. And I didn't put this in the PowerPoint. I will get to the pictures, I promise you. It states that 90% of the time that we get a call, we have to be at that residence in 5 minutes. 95% of the time, we have to be at that residence in 10 minutes, and 100% of the time, we have to be at that residence within 20 minutes. We meet these response times every year, and that's why back in 3-4 years ago, when I stood up here and talked to you about response times out in the east, the city's growing, so we need to continue to make sure these response times, we meet these response times out to the east. But coming down to the downtown, if we have a lot of vehicles parked that we can get to the residents or to patients, it'll increase our response times to the city. So I tasked the captains to see, go out there, take pictures so I can show council and city admin, the city manager, assistant city manager. And right here, we put the ladder truck. And for our ladder truck to work, we have to have our outriggers, and our ladder has to come down. If we can't, our ladder truck is basically just another pumper, another engine. We can't use that ladder truck for its use. That right there was the alley between B and C facing north, and that's with parking on just one side of the street. Again, there's some alleyways that we can maneuver with maybe one parking on the side, but we have to create uniformity where I believe it's going to be hard to have either like no parking on one alley and then on the north side we have one side. I think that's hard, and I think that's more of the enforcement. But for us, time is of the essence. We have the golden hour rule that, we need to have a patient, at least if they're in a trauma patient. We've had trauma patients out on some of the alleyways that need to create care, have that care, which is the hospital. That's called the golden hour rule. This is facing south on B. There's parking on both sides, and the top left-hand picture, we didn't even try to get in. We couldn't fit that truck there. And that's a $1 million truck that we're not going to go and scratch it or, it's a $1 million fire truck. We're not going to go into that alleyway. They decided we're not going to try it. That other picture on the right is between B and C facing north. As you can see, there is enough parking on the side that they can safely maneuver that ladder truck. But again, we got to create some type of uniformity, especially on that downtown area. And then on the bottom one, that one is B and C also facing north, a little bit farther down the alley. There's vehicles, but right there, we need to get our outriggers, and our outriggers are stabilizers. When we lift that ladder truck, it's got to stabilize that ladder truck. There's no way we can do that with 2 cars parked on the side. So again, then the purpose for that ladder truck is nothing. We can't work safely in a safe environment. Do I have another picture? And the other pictures that's B Street facing south. That's the same picture, just a little bit back. And you can see we can't fit that ladder truck. And the bottom one is on the west alley, B facing south, the west alley. We can probably, that area, we can probably fit the ladder truck, safely maneuver, but if you go a little bit farther, there's no way we can. So with that being said, it's when my captains come and tell me, like, there's a problem accessing the residents, and I think Jose is going to talk about how many residents are going to be affected, but we have to safely maneuver in, decrease our response times, because that's the key for us. It's time is of the essence, reduce response times, and safely get from our fire station to that place that we need, that the emergency is at. if there's any questions that you guys have, I can answer. It's the only thing I want to make sure you guys would understand is safety is very important, especially in those alleyways. There's not a lot of room. There's not a lot of room to maneuver. If you guys have seen the alleyway that goes east and west on north of U Street or the Swastigi, and it's south of B. I drove it right now before the council meeting. I was driving the alleys just to see how it is after 5, 6 o'clock. The Tahoe that I have barely fits, and I can't even make the turn into the alleyway. And that's a personal vehicle. So I would like to create some type of uniformity amongst all the alleyways in the downtown San Luis. I'll ask you guys what do you guys think? We met with city admin yesterday, and I don't know, Kay, did we put that up there where I would like to see no parking on the alleyways? That would get us into those sections of the downtown San Luis safely, and those response times will continue to decrease. Any questions or comments?
Questions, comments? Jose, do you have some information you want to share? So when we're ready for the questions and comments?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. So we were concerned on the access through there were properties that they have only access through the alleys. So we wanted to make sure that they have at least one parking space, that we were not taking away that property right from them. So we searched the area, and there were 9 properties with only access through the alleys. However, we saw that they have parking inside their property, all of them. So that would not create an issue if we do the no parking on the alleyway. And this is the picture that Chief was mentioning, the area between B and Ortoswasti that shows the alleys with the parked cars on both sides.
Questions, comments?
So, Chief, and Jose as well and staff, I think this is definitely a security and a safety concern for our equipment and for our residents as well. Have you guys reached out to the families that live in the alleys, or?
We sent out 126 letters to all the residents to invite them to this meeting today.
Today?
You gotta keep in mind that most of these vehicles aren't residents; they're field workers that park there in the mornings. And a lot of them move there after we put the meters on the street, and they don't want to pay the meter. So we come down back to the parking situation downtown that we don't have anything for them to park. But yeah, I know on some streets what we've done temporary parking, like 1 hour max parking, and that'll eliminate this, but they'll move somewhere else. So because they're gone all day.
Anybody else, comments?
I have a question for Chief Ramirez.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Chief, I don't want to be blunt, but I'm going to be blunt. This is a security measure, and I agree with your presentation and what you said. But it sounds like, what happened with the cab drivers a few years back, and then everything changed. Is this not going to change in 4 years?
I would hope it doesn't change in 4 years. If we're keeping these alleyways open and safe for us, I don't see it. And the other consideration, the reason I'm bringing this, the ladder truck that we purchased that we're gonna have delivered in June, it's actually bigger than that truck that took the picture. So having that truck that we're having, we need more space.
Okay. No, yeah, I understand that part. But again, 4 years ago, you showed us a very compelling security issue video and pictures, on the border area. So I hope in 4 years, we don't have to revisit this to change something that, to revert something that you recommended.
4 years ago, the video that I showed was on U Street, going west into the port of entry, where the taxi cab drivers were parked on the north side of the street, and that's when we had to come on onto oncoming traffic. This is what we're talking. The alleyways is on the north side of U Street. And we still, and I believe I addressed it at the council meeting with the taxi cab drivers, that I did not want the taxi cab drivers parked on the north side between William Brooks and Second Avenue, because that would be creating the same thing we had 4 years ago.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, Mayor, please. Yes, we understand that this is a safety issue. Most importantly, we're here for our residents to provide this very important service. We know the struggle that you guys are going through. If we provide a no parking in the alleys, where are these vehicles gonna park? It's just we need to have these alleyways cleared for our residents, but we need to create a solution for these vehicles to park, because we need the farm laborers, if that's what they are, like Matias said, Councilmember Matias Rosales said, that they're there just for so many hours. But we need solutions, we need to create a solution. So I agree with you, Chief and Chief Alvarez. But what are we gonna do with the vehicles?
Hopefully with a traffic study, and if we really, really seriously want, and I know all of us wants to take care of these issues they've been for so long being put in the back burner. With that study, it gives us an idea, and there's some places that people can actually profit from doing private parking, and I believe that we'll find solutions. And it's not just the alleys. It's like here, Councilmember Vargas. Sometimes he cannot leave his house. He lives right there in Frontera. So it is a big issue, and we keep pushing these vehicles into the neighborhoods. So it is a big issue. We need to work on that, and hopefully in the next couple years, we have a really good parking space, somebody that will come and invest and do a horizontal one. We gotta dream big, like something like at the hospital, like at the county building. Why not?
Yeah, we definitely need to find a solution, because this problem is gonna move towards the residential area, and then we're gonna have our residents complaining as well. So I don't know if this issue has been increasing in the last years, or why are we addressing this issue until today? Yes, Chief.
Again, this was brought up about 6 months ago, and from my captains, and they stated, there's been some issues coming into the alleyways. We talked about it, yeah, but nothing was really done. My biggest concern, and the concern that they were talking to me, was the ladder truck that we're purchasing is it's a lot bigger than what we have currently, and they did ask me that is going to be an issue coming starting July 1st.
So
Even though that ladder truck, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Even
Go
though that
ahead.
ladder truck is gonna go to Station 2, but for anything where Station 1 is busy, and right now, I can tell you, Station 1 is busy. They're gonna be coming down into the city, so they will be going into the downtown area, especially it's a commercial. Any commercial, if it's a fire, they'll be coming down. So they will be maneuvering around the downtown area. So, I mean,
At the end of the day, they're gonna move somewhere else. There is places for these cars that are in the alleys to park, but they elect not to. I mean, there is meters there. I mean, people forget that for $3 you can park the whole day, so on forth, and they're just trying not to avoid to pay that. Moving into the residential area, there's ways to control that. You know, residents could be issued, their sticker to be put on the windshield. That way, if they're not required to be there, they could be ticketed and towed. I mean, there's ways to do that at low cost. It's just a matter of us agreeing to, okay, we got to do it, and let's do it because they're parking there because it's free in the alleys. I mean, when I had my store there many years ago, it was always the same issue. It's just no, we've never done anything in regards to that. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of deciding and supporting staff and fire and safety and putting no parking signs, and it's going to be pushed over to the meters. What happens now if we say, okay, let's take away the meters, you're going to have people parking cars overnight, never moving the cars. So that's why you do have to have the meters, and we went through this 6-8 years ago, and that's why we put meters downtown. It's just making it low cost where they're affordable. The parking lots, the profit, like the mayor mentioned, they charge, what, $5-8 for the whole day, and they're full. It's just a matter of forcing it, enforcement, and people adjust, unfortunately. Residents aren't complaining because they have their property to park on, so it's give direction.
Well, Chief, you heard it from the council? Yes. Okay.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, honorable council members. Uh, Public Works, PD, and Fire, we service our community. That's what we do. They provide emergency services. We provide solid waste services, as well as landscape maintenance along right-of-ways and alleyways. The current parking hinders our service, us being able to provide the service to these areas. So that's our stance. It's a problem for us. Yeah, so it's similar to what fire is experiencing. Our solid waste trucks as well, because of their size, they do have issues with our side loaders.
And it's unsafe because if your truck goes in there, you have to reverse backwards. There's no way you're going to turn on that T on that alley right there for sure.
And from what risk management tells us, not our risk management, but the industry of risk management tells us, that's where accidents and issues occur, costly ones.
Well,
I just want to add a comment, Mayor. I know, like Maria said, these cars are here for, and Matias as well, the agriculture. That's what drives our economy in Yuma County. So we can't just ignore the fact that they're coming across the border and all that stuff. We need to find a solution because, like Councilmember Vargas, also they're going to be going into the communities and before we even make a decision, I think that we need to analyze the situation and where are we going to send these cars. I'm assuming this is more happening towards November, December through April when people are working here. I don't foresee this being a problem in the summer, but I do see a lot of vacant land here that maybe we can talk to the owners of the companies and see if they can provide a parking space for their own employees. I mean, have we reached out to them?
That's always been the issue, and that we've tried that in the past, and it's their employees, they should house them, and people want to be close somewhere else, so, yeah.
But, I mean, I know
How are we gonna get that done? This has been a problem forever. So how are we gonna be talking to the owners, which we have, get it done?
Well, I think now that we're gonna be moving where they fix the trucks and everything, there's an awesome corner for the city to invest on a public parking. You provide jobs, you make money, and you're providing a service. And then it will help the downtown area. So we have options, and it's like Councilmember Rosales says, it's a matter of us if we're willing to do the work. And I think all of us are willing to work on this issue. Anybody else?
No.
So I just want to be clear with the direction to staff. What is the direction to staff?
No parking in the alleys.
So
Simple.
are we
Yeah, but
moving
we-
forward with the ordinance?
We need
without-
to be prepared with the solution after that, because
Well, I think the solution is gonna take some work. We can't decide right now. It just takes a matter of more work sessions, you know?
Because
But for right now, it's no parking in the alleyways because we can't afford for them to take away our privileges. And, as Chief Ramirez says, you know, we wanna have an excellence in providing our service for our people that are sick. And if the, oh gosh, I missed the word here. The privileges of the CONs are taken away, you know, we don't want that. They've worked so hard to have that privilege, and that's just an honor for them. So right now, I think it's a step, you know, we'll continue working on. We are not gonna drop the ball and just say, stop working, but I know we will. We'll
Yes,
provide
we,
something.
it's gonna be an item in, we'll put an item in the, consent agenda. And, so that could be, and then very seriously, diligently, start working on solutions. Because it's not gonna go away.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment, like, enforce what Matias says, you know, they choose not to pay. That's why they're just hiding where they can, you know, they're,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
In the alley.
Yeah, they choose not to pay, and
They don't wanna
it's,
pay.
yeah. There's empty parking spaces where you pay, you know, a couple dollars. We can't have everybody,
Happy.
you know,
Okay.
What I will add to staff with this direction that we're providing, especially for these alleys that we're looking to do no parking, just make sure, obviously you guys know, have a transition period, put notices and everything. It's not just one day decide to ticket everybody and tow everybody away. Just give them at least a week notice, say, starting this date, put flyers under, because it's always the same cars. I mean, you could drive out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everybody parks in the same spots. Just give them notice and before we do tow people away.
Yeah, give people ample time.
Yeah.
Put those signs up. Keep reminding people.
And this goes back to many years ago, I always repeated, the signage that we have on the meters, we need to improve that, and I think you guys did in the past, I haven't looked at them lately, but let people know it's not that expensive to park here. They don't park in this parking lot because it's expensive, but the meters are cheaper than the parking lots. But we need the signage on the parking meters, and that will benefit us at the end of the day as well, so, yeah.
Okay.
And to add to that, let's remember that we put a burden on the employees that enforce and that mark those spaces. And, you know, we sometimes don't have the funds to do that.
Okay, anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Do I hear a second?
second.
Everybody in agreement signifying by saying aye.
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 hi.
Opposed? The vice mayor said no. No.
That's my job.
Thank you, everyone. To the chiefs, thank you. Mr. Jose Guzman, thank you. Manny, thank you. Thank you.